There we go.
There. Now, let me start over. We will call the Fiscal Affairs and Audit Standing Committee meeting to order. Yeah, the first item on the agenda is the approval of the minutes from our January 14th meeting. I have a motion, or do I have any changes, additions, deletions to that?
So moved.
Second.
Got a motion and a second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Pose same sign, motion carries. Yeah, follow up from that meeting. Yeah, we did talk a little bit at that meeting about the proposals on different projects and plans. Yeah, as far as, how often they come back to this committee and the board. And is there anything that the committee or the board could do to make that process a little smoother and more efficient for the universities? Yeah, and I believe, we had some conversation that is being talked about at the Council of Business Officers at this point, and don't know whether there's any more feedback, or kind of Elaine, what we would need to do to continue to push that forward. And I know I keep bringing it up, but I don't know whether my fellow regents want to continue with that effort, so that when we have these projects, they're not continually being brought back to the board and putting in delays and additional work for the universities. When we have inflation, cost overruns, just the length of the projects and the planning process that can put those delays in. And as I guess I keep thinking, is there something we can do to make it easier, and more efficient, for the universities going forward?
Chair Dykes, I don't have a whole lot to add other than I very much support that idea. And I think that we need to continue to look how we can be more efficient in our time as well as the time of the institutions.
Chad, is there anything from your end that, I guess, maybe one of the first questions probably for, the Board of Regents is what control or what say do we have in this process, or is it more state regulated or in state statutes that we have to do these things? But what policies, procedures do we have at the board that we could look at and see if the committee and then the entire board would be comfortable with that?
Sure, Chair Dykes, I think, first and foremost, I think the budget cycle and the capital improvement project approvals is kind of the context with which these projects are being reviewed and approved. The dollar amounts, the delegated authority that we've updated in facilities policy recently last fall is a function of board policy. But I might, I don't know if John Yeary might weigh in on this. I mean, there might be some additional detail that we would need to research to understand what latitudes there are, but certainly the structure of the delegated authority for the large capital projects and the small capital projects has come from board policy from the recent past. So, and we've certainly updated that, over time since the board's facilities renewal initiative has begun.
Yeah.
But what you're discussing there, I think there may be other opportunities in the whole structure of that to look at that. Because I will say just a little bit of analysis after the meeting and after the COBO discussion. I think even if we looked at a percentage increase due to market conditions and construction inflation, I think maybe only one project or two this fiscal year would have kind of fallen into that category, unless there was a more robust look at how the delegated authority and the project approval process works in board policy.
Is this something that we maybe need to put a subcommittee together? I guess too, I haven't talked to our chair of the board. Even though Blake's been on this one, I've brought it up in the past. To set some kind of subcommittee of the staff, the regents, the business officers, so that, we do get something that works for everybody.
That sounds like a reasonable idea, Vice President Frisbee.
Certainly. Mr. Chairman, normally the Council of Business Officers has served that role, but we can certainly encourage more participation in that process.
I'm not looking to do set up another committee or anything, but so if we have a structure to continue to look at that, yeah. I mean, with the other members of this committee's, yeah.
I do remember Chair Dykes, if I may speak, we did have a conversation in terms of what's the dollar amount does the board need to be approving these changes? And we came up with $1 million and above is where the board need to be approved. Is that right? From where we were 300K?
Well, Regent Prasker, I would, if I'm following you correctly here, I think there has been more of an incremental approach for these facilities policy updates, meaning, is this cost threshold
Correct.
appropriate to
Yes.
to delegate to the universities? So last September, that kind of incremental approach of increasing those delegated authority cost thresholds led to policy being updated so that the CEOs of the universities can approve their own projects up to just under 1.5 million.
That's it.
Call those small capital projects for a working definition there. Above that, then there was a middle tier of up to $10 million that after the board had approved them as a part of the capital plan each year, and after a program statement had been submitted to the board, so the nature of the project, then amendments would come back. Then president and CEO could approve that kind of middle tier up to 10 million. Then above 10 million,
Is
yeah, everything would be approved by the board. And I say that
we want to fine tune that according to what we are talking about. Yeah, I
I
think
guess I always look at, we've got two projects on the consent agenda for this month, a chiller at the University of Kansas and a chiller at Kansas State University. And I think, I can't remember now what you're looking at, which one. The one at KU is not supposed to be completed for till the end of 27, and Kansas State is the end of 28.
Mhm.
And it's like, we're
I'm-
looking at this today on the consent agenda, and I'm gonna guess the regents are
We'll
gonna
come
look at
back
that.
again.
Yeah, 4 or 5 more times
Exactly.
in that 2 to 3 year time frame.
Yeah.
And what kind of time and effort does it require of the universities to continue to come back to us?
Yeah.
Yeah, the delay, the efficiencies of that process. Yeah, to me, on those kind of projects, it just seems like there's got to be something more efficient than, we approve it today with authority to go forward. Why does it have to keep coming back so often? Yeah.
Yeah.
And I'm assuming it'll come back so often because I've seen it happen so far in 4 years. Yeah.
Chair Dykes, I might just add, as we had refined policy in the past, trying to get something that's more streamlined, albeit not ideal or solving all the problems, in evaluating what other states are doing, other systems are doing. There's a whole range of cost thresholds. They vary so much, and it seems like if we're only limited to saying, well, is this increment correct or is that increment correct, you're going to constantly be addressing the demands and the dynamics of markets and inflation. But if you look at it maybe in terms of categorical approvals, infrastructure projects require this type of oversight by the board. So it might be that incremental approach is insufficient to solve the challenges that you're identifying, and maybe it's a rework of how that approval could be relative to the various types of projects that the universities are doing, or the duration, or any number of those aspects could maybe be considered in a different way than board policy currently addresses them.
Well, if we could continue to look at that, and like Elaine's comment, let's do it through the channels we already have set up to do that, and continue to review that with everybody's approval. Let's keep us some attention to that and see what we can do to make a process a little better.
Sounds good. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Anything else from our agenda call follow-up? Yeah, hearing none, we will go now to new business. Mike, are you ready? Yeah, we have Mike Lowry with Alan Gibbs and Holick on the Zoom call with us. And this is looking at the external management review at Pitt State University that is required anytime you have a change in the university president. So with that, Mike, I'll turn it over to you.
Thank
And
you.
everybody has a copy of his report.
Good morning, Mike Lowry with Allen Gibson Hulick. We were engaged by the Kansas Board of Regents to conduct the external management review for Pittsburgh State University covering the years 2024 and 2025. And as the chair mentioned, this was triggered by the board policy that reviews be conducted anytime a university changes leadership, in this case, the appointment of Dr. Thomas Newsom. Before I begin, just would like to thank Doug Ball and Jamie Dalton at Pittsburgh State University for assisting us to complete this review. The external management review involves a review of non-public funds of the university and affiliated corporations, with non-public funds being defined as those accounts that do not run through the state's accounting system. Pittsburgh State University includes one controlled affiliated corporation and one non-controlled affiliated corporation, the controlled one being the Research Foundation. In this case, the university has suspended operations and there were no transactions to review. The non-controlled affiliated corporation was the foundation, or being the foundation. A summary or highlight of our procedures included interviewing the president and their direct reports, collecting and evaluating conflict of interest forms, reviewing board minutes, reviewing any operating agreements between the university and affiliated corporations, reviewing any audited financial statements of the affiliated corporations to ensure compliance and consistency with requirements, working with the finance office to identify and gain an understanding of the flow of non-public funds and those transactions. At Pittsburgh State University, the non-public funds were centered around the university, student activity funds, and the foundation. Populations and samples included any transactions from non-public funds equal to or greater than 500, and any payments to the president or direct reports, regardless of amount, that existed at the affiliated corporations as well as the university level. We evaluated transactions in relation to policies, procedures, and controls of the university. And from the samples that we tested, 51% of the student activity funds and 60% of the foundation funds were tested. Our results were that we noted no issues with compliance of policies related to board minutes and operating agreements and financial statements. As far as transactions related to non-public funds, in general, the supporting documentation was complete, and we noted no issues to controls or propriety of transactions. For the conflict of interest forms, we noted the following did not have current forms. Carl Stumo, Vice President, Student Affairs and Enrollment Management, Dr. Susan Bond, Executive Vice President and Provost, Academic Affairs, and Emily I'm going to pronounce her name wrong, Executive Director, University Affairs. And per discussion with Jamie Dalton, the internal auditor at the university, there was a gap in the COI management process, was discovered during an internal audit, and is currently being corrected. That concludes my presentation. I'll be happy to answer any questions.
The regents have any questions of Mike? Yeah, looks like you gave a good report there in writing and in verbal there, Mike. Got no questions. Doug, do you have any comments? Yeah, hearing no questions or comments, do we accept this? Yes, I'd take a motion to accept this report.
So moved.
Got a motion?
Second.
Got a second? All those in favor say aye. Opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Mike, thank you very much. Appreciate your report and your time this morning.
Absolutely. And I always welcome follow-up questions. If after the meeting someone thinks of anything and wants to reach out, Elaine knows how to reach me.
Perfect.
Thank you.
All right, have a
Hopefully
good
we don't
day.
engage you anytime soon again.
Oh, we have a.
Well, we have.
Oh.
We've
We'll
got
see you soon.
we've got 2 more on the docket. All right, have a good day.
Thanks. Got annuity here. Yeah, perfect. On to our next, Jeff here.
Jeff.
Jeff, yeah, we're ready for our computations on the composite financial index. We've got Jeff Hunter from the University of Kansas here to make a presentation, but Elaine, you want to lead us off in that?
Yes. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So just a little background, Jeff is here in his role. So as someone who is key for the university's financial reporting, each one of the state universities, and is common practice among all of public institutions of higher ed, they all gather elements of data from their annual financial statements, and it folds into a document that we collect, and we report to you each year on the composite financial index. And this is used partially for board policy purposes that references cash reserves, but want to be sure in the context of understanding as the 3 regional universities are going to give you a mid-year update here in a moment. But before they do that, wanted to give a refresher or a little brief overview of how do we compute the composite financial index? How do you approach looking at it? Because if you look at the page for each of the universities, we date this information back to 2009. So we've got quite a few years running now of this information. And how do you look at that? Should you compare one university to another, or should you just look at the individual university on its own separately? So hoping that, Troy Brune from formerly Wichita State has given us this little rendition, but this year, Jeff from KU is going to help us out. And I'm going to pull up your presentation, and you will have control of it if I can get over to that page. There we go. Getting there.
Appreciate your acronym definition on page 1.
Well, good morning. I'm very pleased to be here to present this. I've done this a few years back. I've taken a couple years off because I've had conflicts, and I'm glad to be able to come back and give this presentation again. As you mentioned, the sorry. There we go. As you mentioned, on the very first page is just a definition of the acronyms, because we all have different acronyms. I don't want to get you lost, and so just want to have a central location for you all to be able to see what that is. So what is the Composite Financial Index, CFI? I'm just going to refer to it from a CFI from the very beginning. It is a benchmark tool developed for a standardized reporting for most part, all universities across the nation. A lot of them are going to be from a NACUBO and Higher Learning Commission perspective. So it's just a way of kind of looking at them across the entire thing. It is a combination of 4 separate ratios: the primary reserve, net operating revenues, viability ratio, and return on net assets. We'll get into those a little bit more detail later. It just helps to simplify the presentation. So that way you're not trying to look at 4 different ratios. You're trying to look at, okay, here's what it looks like in one smooth term. So that way it's not, okay, this one's up, this one's down. How do I look overall? The CFI does provide a way of looking at the overall financial health of an institution and one numerous financial metric. It provides a single metric comparable across all universities, as I mentioned, for both NACUBO and higher learning education. And it is a consistent and continual awareness of an institutional's performance over the years. What you have here is just kind of a scale. it's not really anything that, okay, yeah, is it 4 good or is it 4 a bad or is 5 a good? Or it kind of just kind of gives you a different scoring scale across the spectrum. What are the implications? It's not an absolute precision thing. You can't just look at it by itself. It it is it is important to also look at this when you're looking at non-financial numbers. Think student counts. Think research awards if you have a lot of research awards. Think of uh, potential growth or industry type of impacts that can have an impact to it. The one thing to also kind of be aware of is an institution with a low or declining CFI will be disadvantaged when you're looking at it because people don't want to go towards those lower declining CFI entities because they presume to be a little bit more riskier. You just have to kind of be able to understand the different risks associated with all that. The one thing to understand with the CFI is it's best to be viewed over a period of time, not a point of time. It is not important. It's not a good thing to always just look at a single point of time. It's always important to look, okay, is it improving? Is it decreasing? How is it looking? And then can you understand how that is also impacting other decisions, other aspects that are happening on the university itself? And as Elaine mentioned, this is something that we provide on an annual basis to the Board of Regents. We have multiple years. We have probably now almost decade or almost 2 decades of historical data. So it's a very consistent and it's a very formulaic way of looking at it. So the CFI itself, as I mentioned previously, it is a weighted calculation of 4 different ratios. The primary reserve, net operating ratio, revenues, the viability ratio, and the return on net assets. I want to make sure that the information that is presented in here does not represent KU's ratios. I want to make sure I'm clear on that. This is just for illustrative purposes. Jeff DeWitt will be giving our presentation next month. Correct. So he will be more involved with that, but I wanted to at least show you how the calculations work in this presentation. So the first one, the primary reserve, it is the measure of the financial strength of an institution. Are the resources available to support the ongoing aspect of the university? It calculates based on how much expendable resources they currently have. How long can that university last? It is important to understand that this also this assumes no additional resources are coming in. So this is one of those point in time type of things. So in the example that I have showing on here, we show all the unrestricted and the expendable portions of both the primary government as well as any component units, and then any potential eliminations. And then we look at, okay, how are they expending the resources? How are they for both the primary government and all of it? So in this case, this entity could last 1.5 years based on what it's telling me. So based on the expendable resources, they would burn through all their resources within 1.5 years. So that's where this ratio comes into play. The next one is the net operating ratios. This one provides a picture of the surpluses and deficits of the entity itself. Fundamentally letting you know, is the institution living within its means? Is it bringing in enough money, or is it spending more than it's bringing in? In this case, what I've presented is that this organization is actually spending more than it's actually bringing in. So just kind of showing it has a negative net operating rate revenues kind of calculation. The third ratio is a viability ratio. This measures the expendable resource in order to cover debt, and it's as of the balance sheet date. It's not an absolute threshold, as everything else in this calculation is. It's not an absolute threshold. And it's also important to note that not all debt comes due at the same time. So you kind of have to weigh that a little bit with this. So in this case, what we have here is on the viability ratio, the current resources are able to cover a little over 3.7 times the amount of debt, to cover its debt by 3.7 times. So in this case, it's a relatively healthy organization from that perspective. The final one is a return on net assets. This is the only ratio that actually spans both higher education and everything else that you ever think of. Return on net assets is one of the only ratios that is for profit, not for profit, higher ed, they're all the same. Are you better off than what we were a year ago? Does it support the strategic direction of the institution? Are we utilizing what we need to utilize? Are we doing what we can do in order to provide the flexibility? In this case, we are. We're getting a return of about 0.5%. It could be higher, it could be lower. It's always one of the things that it just kind of, however you view it from an overall perspective. So those are the four main ratios that go into this calculation. So on the screen here this is how we actually go through and calculate the CFI itself. It is, you take the values of those different ratios. There's an industry factor and an industry rate. It comes up with a score. There's a minimum and a maximum on that score. And it comes up with a total, in this case, 6.5. So it's important to look, when you're looking at that CFI, where does it fall within the performance standard? So 6.5 in this case would be able to compete using future assets. We're able to see growth, potential growth in this institution going forward. If you're looking at a 1 or 2, you're looking at, okay, we need to be doing some adjustments somewhere within the programs itself. So that's why it's important to look at it as a scale. So what I have on the screen here is I've plotted on the left side of the screen all the different ratios. Try to understand how that looks, and understanding of the grasp of that chart versus the one on the right. Which one is easier for us to read? Let's be honest. It'd be the one on the right in my head. And so what you see is you see ebbs and flows and stuff, but it's always important, as I've mentioned, it needs to be looked at over a period of time. So in this case, this institution, it's been running around the 5 to 6, which means that it's able to continue with the resources it's had, can potentially grow a little bit more. If we get more resources in, it can sustain itself even more, or it could expand even more. If they start losing, then they need to be evaluating how they need to proceed from that point forward. So that, in essence, is the CFI in total, but I just want to open it up and see if there's any questions. By all means.
Thank you for the presentation. It's very informative. Question I have is, you mentioned that this index was developed for higher education, which made a lot of sense, but can you expand a little bit more on the factor and the industry? And so what is the purpose of an industry factor if this is meant to be, and how does that change?
So the industry factor, where this was stemming from, this entire calculation, there's literally a book that tells us how to do this entire calculation.
Well, I'm glad we have you here. I can skip.
And it's probably about 100-page book.
Yeah.
So let me try and summarize a 100-page book into 20, 30 minutes. So the factors and all that stuff came from the industry. They really wanted to try and have a uniform way of looking at it. So every factor is the same for every university that uses
so it doesn't change.
The factors and the weights do not change from university to university. The only thing that will change are the inputs, being what are the actual results of the different ratios themselves.
Great, thank you.
So my
Bridget?
question, I think from the last page, I could see that they are weighted equally? Or they're weighted differently?
So the primary reserve and the viability reserve are a little bit
Same.
heavier.
Okay, the
But
other,
then the net operating and the return on net assets are a little bit lower.
that's
but
where the
the-
0.35 and
yes.
0.35 come in.
Correct.
And then, which surprises me, because I feel like viability ratio is such a abstract
Mhm.
way of looking at it, and everything else is financial and hard assets, so
My,
may throw off.
my understanding with the way I've understood the way the calculations work is the primary reserve is the one that kind of talks about the operations. How can it actually operate
course.
and stuff like that?
Yes,
The viability is, are they able to support the debt load that they currently have? And so you're looking at the current debt load. Is it able to be supported by its current resources? And that's where the viability comes in, meaning, because if you have a high debt load, you're spending more on that debt instead of by chance providing more program expenses to help the institution with the students and stuff like that
right.
versus the primary reserve. But the thing is both, and I think this is, and I'm guessing, I'm going out on a limb. The reason why they put the two at the same level is because of the different aspects. Debt is an important factor when you're looking at a when you're looking at a,
Sometimes it's good.
correct.
Yeah.
And not all debt is bad.
Yeah.
And that's why I also mentioned that not all debt comes due at the same time.
Correct.
And so you have to kind of weigh that into this calculation. I do agree with you in that it is a little bit more of a fluid
And
factor.
that's where the business of where is this university heading, right?
Correct.
If you took a loan on a heavy machinery in the medical industry, but the university is serving agricultural industry.
Yes.
So is that really a good, I guess it'll be
You have to
the
look at-
viability ratio.
Yeah, that would impact the viability ratio, not necessarily the primary reserve ratio.
Of course not.
So,
Yeah, got it. But that's a heavy emphasis and weighted.
yes. And I think that's the reason why they put those two at the same level is because one is the operations and one is the debt load.
Thank you.
Yep.
Regent Wolfmore.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So I think you said in the beginning of your presentation, but correct me if I'm wrong.
Mhm.
Did you say that you can't really compare the universities in the state of Kansas with each other with regard to the CFI? Or did I misunderstand that?
To a point, you shouldn't look at it in a vacuum.
Mhm.
You can look at it from, okay, is one university able to use their resources to expand their university and all that stuff, while another university may need to keep the resources more contained in order to deal with any programmatic deficits that are growing within the program itself. So from that perspective, that's about where you'd want to look at it. You don't want to say that, okay, KU's CFI is this, K-State's CFI is this, KU's better or worse than K-State. It's just a matter of how are they looking. That's why it's also important to look at it from with the non-financial aspect too. So.
Okay, and then if I could ask one more question. Your point, an institution with a declining or lower CFI would be disadvantaged when competing one with a higher CFI, which makes sense. But
Mhm.
what are examples of that? Competing in what arena?
So, where I've seen a lot of these, and I'm going to speak on just from a KU perspective, because I submit this on behalf of the university to the higher education, learning education, is they will, some entities, some organizations will maybe not be as forthright with providing grants, awards, future abilities and stuff like that. They may focus more on those that they view less riskier than they would if they are a little bit more riskier, just because they want to make sure that they're getting the biggest bang for their dollar. So
You mean like federal grants or award?
Correct.
Okay, thank you so much. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Bridget Crocker.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Sorry, one last question. You mentioned you shouldn't look at this in isolation from each year when making decisions. I think you said you should look at a trend.
correct.
Is there a standard length of trend that is typical to use, 3-year average, 5-year average kind of trend when making, because these decisions that are on this chart that
Mhm.
Regent Moore just referred to aren't short-term decisions.
Correct.
So what's kind of an industry standard in terms of the time?
I think for most part, what I've seen across most of the industry is around of anywhere between a 5 and a 10-year viewpoint is typically what I've seen, because that gives you enough of the history to see how you're currently comparing to that history. It also, with some of the CFIs, you'll see some wild fluctuations, and those fluctuations can happen because of things that aren't controllable. Think market impacts on investments, because you can have huge unrealized gains one year and then huge unrealized losses the next year, and you're going to see your CFI, and that's why it's always important to look at it from a trend perspective.
Thank you.
Yep.
Any other questions for Jeff? Jeff, will you stay around? Yeah.
I can stay for a little bit, yes.
Okay, I didn't know whether, once we start the presentations and get some university, real numbers here, we might have more
I can't
questions for you.
speak for the other universities. I can only speak for KU, but unfortunately, my KU rep's not here. Well,
Got Ashley here.
yeah.
Some of us think it's a real improvement from,
I can remember.
if Jeff were here, I'd say the same thing. So any else? Jeff, thank you very much for that tutorial on the CFI. Yeah, so with that, yeah, we will go on to the next item, which is now live and in person, the real CFIs. Before you get up, Wesley, Angela, what's your schedule going to be on when you need to leave to go make another present? Okay, so you don't need to leave at any point. Okay. Wesley.
Morning, good to be with you. As we're getting up, I would like to say one thing. It's nice to see Jeff here. About a year and a half ago, I got a new controller at Fort Hays State, and Jeff has been a great help to Barron. When we have a phone a friend, Jeff is often one of the people. He calls. There's others as well, but it's nice to be able to say thank you, Jeff, for being that for my guy. And I know there's others as well, and it's nice for you guys to know that that does actually happen throughout the Regent system. That we work together that way. Like I said, my name is Wesley Winch. I'm the Vice President for Administration and Finance at Fort Hays State. And delighted to be with you. I'm going to talk about this mid-year update. Let's see, does this work? That does. Okay, well, first, I'm going to start talking today about the revenue side of the equation. So we'll talk about the revenues, then we're going to talk about the expenses. And so at Fort Hays State, about 33% of our budget comes from the state general fund dollars that the legislature gives to us. We're very grateful for those dollars. They're very helpful. Another 20% from tuition, about 21% from restricted fees and such, and then a smattering of other things from federal, auxiliary, and other to make up the remainder of that. One of the things that really drives our revenue is tuition. So let's talk about enrollment for a minute. The next couple of slides talk about enrollment and kind of break it down in two different ways. So this first one is FTE. And in fiscal year 25, it's nice to know that 62% of our students are resident Kansans. Another 22% are non-resident and 16% come from our cross-border programs. And after a few years of enrollment decline, you can see that trend. We were going down. We were actually up last year. So fiscal year 25 was last year, and we were up about 1%, 98 FTE. And that was nice to be able to say, you know, if I was looking in, if I were going to add another one, and fiscal year 26 is not done yet, so if I were going to add the next one, so far we are running a little ahead, about 1% ahead this year, which is nice to know. Our first-time full-time freshmen were up in the fall of 2025 by 102 headcount. The resident enrollments were up by 145. Our international programs were pretty stable. And the retention rate is good. We're at 77.1%, which for us is a high mark for many years. It's a really good improvement on our retention rate. Some of our programs that are performing well for enrolling new students are nursing, allied health, and social work, which are really nice workforce programs that are helping lead the charge on some of those enrollment gains. Looking at it from an SCH, which is what I like to look at, because I always feel like SCH is what really drives revenue. And so if you look at this from SCH perspective, it's got the same curve because they're going to be very correlated. But our credit hour production last year was also up about 1.2%, which was great news because we conservatively budgeted a 1% decline last year. We were up 1.2% instead of down 1%, which was nice. Looking ahead this year, once again, we are running ahead about 1% on our SCH production. So 2026. One notable trend here is that we are increasing in the on-campus, but have been decreasing in the online space. So that's an area of focus for us on our enrollment, where we're trying to get stabilize the online enrollments a little bit. Yes, Elaine.
Sorry, I just want to interrupt real quickly because the idea of the who is online versus who's on campus has come up with some legislative data requests. So Wesley, if you could just comment a little bit about how you distinguish between who is counted as on campus, who is not. How do you make that distinction? We do not, we used to in years past, we used to gather that distinction in our data collections, and we do not anymore. I know there are students who live in dorms and take all of their courses online. So you might also comment on the fiscal impact of someone being on campus versus not.
Sure. Thank you, Elaine. So for us, the way we determine whether somebody's an online student or on campus, if 100% of their credits that they took are online. So we know there's a lot of hybrid students taking hybrid. They're on campus, they're taking online class, they might take, but if they have even one class that's face-to-face, we know they're on campus, and we can pull that data out of our system. And so if there's even one, then we count them as an on-campus student. If all of their coursework is online, we count them as an online student. That's how we determine the difference there. And there is a really big impact for having students living on campus. Generally speaking, on-campus students take more credit hours. So we might have a smaller increase in headcount, but what we see is it leverages higher on our credit hour production if they're on campus. On-campus students also live in our dorms. They contribute to our auxiliary revenues and other things, and plus they come to our basketball games and cheer loudly and create a fun dynamic to have them on campus. It's not that we love our online students too, and there's a lot of things we're trying to do to get them engaged. But in general, on-campus students do help us in those other ways. Okay, this is a chart that shows the sources of our tuition and how it's broken down between on-campus, online, cross-border, and total. Online is about 54% of our revenue comes from our tuition revenue is online. And then another 32% from on campus and about 14% from our cross-border programs. That top line where you see where it had gone down and then gone back up, that is driven by two things really. One of them is we have had increased enrollments, but the other is we've increased our tuition rate. That's kind of driving that upward trend in the last couple of years. All right, so that's kind of the revenue side of the picture. We'll talk now about the expenses. So about 60% of everything that we spend goes to compensation and benefits for our people. You know, we are a people service organization. That's where most of it goes. Another 22% goes to supplies and services and other expenses to make things run. There's some scholarship money and depreciation and such that go into it. And that's really where our expenditures come through. Most of it's right into our people. And then looking at the mid-year budget report. So this is, for us, it's a cash basis on that. When it says year-to-date actuals, that's cash for us. And this is where we were as of December 31st at the time when we pulled this data. And we're tracking really well with our budget, honestly. As of December 31st, we have 78.4% of planned revenues and 50.7% of planned expenses. Those revenues, I know that 43.9% of tuition is collected. That's cash for us. We could have put in accrual, which would have then jumped it quite a bit higher, but we thought showing you the cash numbers, but that's about where we are every year. Last year, we were at 44.1% at this time, so we're really very close to where we were. And last year, we ended up higher than our budget. And we're actually tracking to be higher than our budgeted, our tuition revenue budgeted this year. So I think we're on target to be up in revenue on our tuition and on target within timing tolerances for our expenditures. The big difference on the capital improvement, we're on the bottom where you see that it's 18.9%. That $15 million on the left of the budget is really driven by our Stroop Hall program, which was funded by the legislature. This is the addition to our nursing facility. That is now under construction. They gave us money. And during planning and design, you don't spend a ton of that, but during construction, it comes out. So it's going to be starting to catch up. But as of December 31st, we were just getting into construction. If you came to campus now, you'd see there's the steel and stuff is starting to come up on that facility. Yeah.
Wesley, on tuition for second semester is due when? This is December 31. I assume at only 44%. You get most of it's due in January.
Yeah, it's due in January. 20th day is like the middle of February, actually. So that's when that really starts to set.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Do you always pull cash budgets or?
No, we don't. Sometimes we pull accrual, but I thought this would be the most useful for you to see the actual collections instead of the accruals. If I put the accrual up there, that year-to-date actual would be more like 90, would be like $42 million. And I didn't think it'd be 97% of budget because most students sign up for their spring classes in December. And so it would show instantly that money's there, but we hadn't actually collected it. Right. Okay, so this is 5 years of expense data. And there's a couple of things here that I just thought I would address or talk to you about because that jumped out to me, and I thought, well, let's just get ahead of it and tell you which things were of interest to me. The big one is the drop in scholarship. You'll see there's about an $8 million drop from last year to this year in scholarship. It's not that we're spending less; it's that there's a new accounting standard of how we have to do that, and the difference is in the past we would expense all of those, and now it's basically a contra revenue. And so the net end is not really different. It's just one comes off the revenue and one comes off the expense side. So that's really the drop there. If we added that back in, then you would see we would actually have an increase in our total operating expense, which is probably real for us. We're up a little bit. And the reason for that is a number of things. You'll see one of the increases in institutional support. And we got money from the state legislature for regional stabilization for some other projects. We've been spending some of that on things like upgrading our ERP system and our workforce development programs. And so that extra dollars coming out of institutional support of about $1 million was planned for and known. And that's sort of what we've been doing with that. So that's part of what's driving that. But we also have the revenues to offset that.
Expenses would you consider as a student support kind of an initiative?
Boy, that could go in a lot of different places. So for example, if you're doing advising, that may come up under student services, or depending on how it's done, it might be under academic support. So those National Institute of Student Success type dollars that we've done, they could fall under many of these. If it's software, that could be, it might even be considered institutional support.
Question to you is, of course, Board of Regents have initiatives, like we have goals and initiatives. And we know that we want to push them hard in terms of like, how do we achieve it? We can't achieve it without putting resources behind it. And so if we can, I don't want to do too much of work, but is there an analysis that we do? Where do we put our money towards our mission?
Regent Parasker, in terms of specific, just narrowing into the student success dollars, the budget folks at the campuses have given me some anecdotes and narrative key points of where they have directed those dollars so that we can correlate the initiative from the board that we will implement the NIST playbooks. And the legislature has given us state support to do that so far, and we have good prospects for 2027. Then, you know, are we getting a bang for the buck, if you will? And so we believe there are correlations there. I also believe, and I wasn't aware of the scholarship change in accounting standards, so that's helpful to know. I also believe that the state's improvement in funding student financial aid is helping us with things like student retention. So a student isn't starting, they might get some good scholarships in their freshman year, and then suddenly there isn't that financial support and they have to drop out. So we do have some analysis, and we're going to talk about that in March in the enrollment report about the success that we're seeing. And Matt Keith has also gathered a lot of those anecdotes and data points for us with our DRP team. So I think we do have some good information. Of course, on the board's capital renewal initiative, the campuses and Director Bristow have given us a lot of data on how much we have improved our standing with our buildings and how much better how much worse we would be but for what we've been working on. So yes.
Thank you.
Okay. Any other questions on the 5-year expense trend? Move forward. We can always come back. I wanted to talk about a little bit about where we are with our debt principal balance. We've been going down. In fact, last year, May of 25, we paid off one of our bonds entirely. It was for a Memorial Union, so it's nice to have that debt service go down. Our debt service for these bonds is 1.14%. We spend about $1.9 million on our bond debt service right now. There's also, there was another GASB standard. I accidentally touched that GASB standard, which made us include a liability on our books for our software leases. And so when we did that, if you add all of those liabilities up, our debt service is 3.8%. But if you just look at the bonds themselves, it's 1.14%. And nice thing is that we just barely last December got an upgrade in our Moody's rating. We were A1 negative and they upgraded us to A1 stable. And so Moody's agrees that we are a good, that we're improving and that they think we're stable. This is CFI. So Jeff Hunter talked about this one. We're up. Our CFI is up to 6.47 in fiscal year 25. Last year we were at 5.23. And there's two things that's really driving that this year. And the first one is we did improve. I don't think we would have improved all the way to 6.47, but we did improve. But what really, one of the pieces that drove us up that is our affiliations. So we affiliated with the two tech colleges, Northwest Tech and North Central. And that happened in July of 2024, which meant that 2025 was the first year we got to put those component units on our financials. And so just recognize that part of what's doing this is that we got 2 new component units on our books this year. And so that helped push us in a place that we had not been previously. I still think we would have been up, we just wouldn't have been up this big. But if you look at our reserve ratios, they've been trending in the right way. And to Jeff's point, that big spike in the middle of the graph there, the yellow one, that was a nice year. That year there was a really good return on the market, and then it didn't happen the next year. So we kind of had one of those anomaly years where it went up and down. So looking at just our tuition and fees per semester, this is how we compare to our peers across the nation. There's often a set of universities that we consider our peers, and this is where we are in comparison to them on our tuition and fees every semester, over $1,400 more to go to any of these, even the closest one to us. And this is where we are compared to the MIAA folks. So we feel like we're a really good value. We try to keep our prices, our tuition and fees in a good place so that we can pass that along to our students. And I feel like we don't have a lack of quality because of that. I think we give a quality education at Fort Hays State. Looking kind of forward, some of the key challenges that I feel like we have at Fort Hays State University, regulatory political uncertainty, any threats to state funding would be difficult for us. Also, just even the international stuff with our international programs can be is of concern to us. Enrollment, of course, as we look forward, the enrollment cliff, and that we feel like there's still going to be headwinds and pressures on enrollment as we go forward. We have teams together to work on that, but we just think that's going to be a continued challenge. We expect that, and we still have employment market continue to be challenging. We strive to navigate it and keeping our faculty and staff, and particularly around being able to give them salaries that are market driven. And then any resources we have for new initiatives to be strategic and to grow, you have to have dollars to be able to, and resources to be able to do some of those things. But to reach that, we also have some strengths, and some of our strengths are the affordability and value of our programs. The extra scholarship and need-based aid dollars for students that we've been getting from the state and other places have been very helpful. Some of our student success initiatives, our freshman enrollment, like I said, our retention's at 77.1%. That's a high water mark for us for a long time. I do see that those are having an impact. And some of our workforce development and community partnerships serving our region in Western Kansas, our partnerships with the affiliations with High Plains Mental Health, the Forge grant we're doing, and kind of an intangible, but I really enjoy the people we work with. There's an ethic of hard work and care and innovation that pervades the people at Fort Hays State. I think that's a nice thing that helps us out, and I think it's a strength of our university there. And with that, I thank you for your support, and just stand for questions.
Question, Regent Wolfmore?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So you mentioned state appropriations and the importance of the stability of them. And I know currently there's a possibility of you losing a portion of your regional stabilization money. I think they're giving you some operating money to kind of soften the blow. Number one, how will that hurt this? And number two, are you hearing that they're going to continue to give you that and soften the blow in the following year, or it's just, that's it? And that's probably an unknown.
Yeah, the future piece is unknown, although the way, if it goes to our base, it would sort of be expected that it would probably continue into the future. That would be my anticipation, but I thought that this was going to continue to the future the way it was written up originally. So one never knows. But yeah, right now, the way that it's done is a $2.4 million reduction to our operating, to dollars given to us from the state. And that would be challenging. We'd have to navigate that. And of course we would. We would get together with our team and figure out how to do it, but that would be a direct impact on the revenue we have to the university. We'd have to figure out how we're going to navigate that.
Okay, well, hopefully there's still hope that that won't happen, but thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Any other questions? Wesley, thank you for playing Ethan's normal role, being the first up where all the questions come in and then he gets offended that we ask him the questions and nobody else. So you've taken his role on and handled it very well. Angela, Warrior State.
Since he's not up today, you can do that one too, just so you remember that. My name is Angela Wolgram, and I am the Vice President at Emporia State University. And I'm going to share with you some of our mid-year updates. I'm going to first start with our enrollment data and our fall head count by residency, that top graph there. Overall, that trend is trending from a decline to a stabilization. We are not yet back to peak levels, but it is definitely trending in the right direction. You also see that residents remain the core of our enrollment base, and that we have significantly lost a lot of international students. If you look back at 2013, is that what that says? It's so small. We were at like 566, I believe the number was, and we're currently at 44.
Oh.
If you look at our annual credit hour production, you do see that we are pretty much 50-50 on online versus on campus. We do define on campus as students who take 1 credit hour or more on campus. If you're 100% online, that's how we define that as well. I know you asked that question earlier. The other thing I want to make note about this, since it's not trending in the same direction as our head count, we do have a high school concurrent program that we've really doubled down on. We call it our Jumpstart program. This program has doubled since last year. However, those students are primarily part-time. And so what you see is they don't generate the full-time enrollment or the full credit hour production that a normal student would. A lot of data shows that students who come in with some sort of credit hour momentum retain and do better, whether that's at our institution or at other institutions. So we've definitely been focused on that group around our area. I also think there's other things probably involved with our annual credit hour production reduction. A few years ago, I don't know exactly when, but all our programs were reduced to 120 credit hours instead of 124 or 130. So that does have an impact as well. So you no longer have to take those additional classes to get your degree.
Angela, that'd be a question for all of you. Is there a way on the online, since the legislature is always kind of asking online versus on campus, to track where they're signing in? Or they're an IP address or something to see if they are truly on campus, but taking all their classes online?
We might be able to, we could ask that question. We do have some like data for like their address that could help us a little bit.
Also, identity management should give you that.
Okay,
They'll be not sitting in their room all day.
right.
They'll be on the campus and
You'd be able to see when they're,
That will tell us.
okay, yeah.
But even if they were in their dorm or something.
Right, but they'll use their ID, I'm assuming, to go in and go out in cafeteria. That should.
I mean, if it'd be something that would show more on campus, which
Yeah,
seems to be something that is
definitely.
interest to a
Great.
catty corner across the street.
Mhm. Absolutely. Our 20th day census information in front of you now reflects growth nearly in every major student population that we have. Our total head count is increased almost over 6%. Our residential housing has increased 23% over last year. And our first-time undergraduate enrollment increased by nearly 30%. Like I spoke about on the first slide, our high school concurrent, you can see there went from 113 to 228 students, in more than doubling that student cohort. The momentum that you see coming from this really has to do with the alignment across our institution related to recruitment, academics, and student life and finance, all really pulling in the same direction.
Do you include the 102% increase of high school concurrent as online?
Depends whether or not they are some of those students come to campus to take some of those courses, and some of them take them strictly at the high school. Next is our mid-year update on our financials, our budget to actual. You can see our SGF, our state general funding, is at 50% revenue. We're halfway through the year. Our tuition is at 55%, meaning that we have a slight increase in revenue over what we had budgeted, which is good news. I do see the same trend for our spring numbers as well. So that's going to bring in a little bit more revenue than we had anticipated. Our expenses to date are at about 46%, which is a very reasonable spend for this time of the year. There's really nothing that stands out here to us. We look at this monthly and we will continue to focus on it and manage expenses as we go throughout the year.
This be a cash like Wesley was, yeah.
All our reporting is cash basis until we actually do our financials, and that's the only time we put them into accrual.
Okay, thank you.
This slide shows you our operating expenses by program over the last 6 years. It is an all funds view. I'm going to focus on the changes from last year to this year. We've been focusing on additional support to improve our student experience and outcomes, and you'll see that in the increase in our instruction, our academic support, and our student services, all related to, you know, the NIST funding and all the things that we're trying to do to support those students academically. Our athletics has also, if you can see, that's grown quite a bit over the last 5 to 6 years. A few years ago, we sat down and we did a review of our athletic funding compared to our MIAA, and it showed that we were severely underinvested as a university. So in response, we did implement a 5-year plan to strengthen our institutional support of that area. So you can see where we're at there on that. And similar to Fort Hays State, the reduction in our scholarship amount it was related to the change in the accounting and how that scholarship is being calculated. For us, if we had not made that change, for comparison, our number would have been about 8.5 million. So it does show an increase there, which also is another area that we've been intentionally trying to grow. Finally, the change in institutional support, that is driven by the $8.1 million debt repayment transaction that we received from the state last year. That payoff included a $2.4 million internal loan that was recorded as a non-operating, non-expense item. As a result of that activity, it shows an increase in institutional support, but does not represent an increase in operational expenditures. And so, just in case you have any questions on that, I would be happy to have our controller share the information around that. They worked with the state accounts and reports as we tried to make that entry. I don't like how that looks, but that is how we were told to do it. So other than that, I don't really have anything else on that slide. The next 2 slides show how our tuition and fees compare. Our first one is to our MIAA. I will tell you that on both of these slides, we have remained competitive and in the same spot on both of these slides when I show you the designated and aspirational peers. One of the interesting things that as we were looking at this slide, that I found was that we do offer flat rate tuition in Emporia State University. And I think that does differentiate us a little bit because it allows our students to take more credit hours without paying more money once they reach that, which also then helps support getting them to graduation on time. There are a couple of folks in these slides that also do the tuition, the flat rate tuition, or they call it block grant. Pittsburgh State being one of them, but we are one of 4 in there. So I think that's an important note. So here it is on our designated and aspirational peers. Again, we're in the same position, showing that we're very affordable and competitive within this group. Here are our financial indicators. Thank you for them explaining all of this because there is a lot to this. Our CFI is currently at a 5-year average, is sitting at 6.5. You'll see our current being at 6.32. Our other ratios also show strong positions, with all of them being above what I consider the baseline. Our primary reserve ratio, which shows we have enough funds to cover unexpected cost, is sitting at 2.51. Our viability ratio, which shows that we can cover our debt payments, is sitting at 2.75. Our net operating revenue and our return on net assets are both above the benchmark of 0, being at 0.48 and 0.58 respectively. Our debt service overview, we did pay off a Twin Towers housing debt obligation last fiscal year, so that leaves us with just these 2 debt issuances. We have the Memorial Union, which is set to be paid off in 2030, and we also have our housing, which is set to be paid off in 2038. And I'll close with this. We're seeing really encouraging signs. Our enrollment is up, our housing is up and strong, our pipeline is growing. All of those are really positive markers. But we also know that we still have a lot of work ahead of us. State funding, enrollment challenges, demographic challenges, we're all facing that. And so even though we're proud of the progress we've made, and we know that with the arrival of President Baker, that we will continue to focus on those challenges and keep us moving ahead. Any questions?
Any Regent questions of Angela?
What is the Moody rating?
Our Moody's rating is A1 stable. A couple of years ago, we were at negative, and last year when we had our review, they moved us to stable. We probably have our review again probably in May this year. So.
And I consider when we were in they asked the question about what's the expense or per student. Did you get that answer?
I've got the, we'll work on that.
I was trying to calculate here, what the expenses are versus how many students we have enrolled in the year, and seems like we're spending, I think with 2025, we are in a good trend,
Yes.
especially with number of students.
Yes. Yes. We can get that information to you if that's something that would be.
Be something across
something?
You can-
the expenses per student. Just
So
kind of
the
on
cost
an
of-
average.
Yeah.
the cost per student can be measured different ways. So the actual direct price point, the published price, the sticker price to students, and then the state subsidy per students, you can measure it different ways. And we are actually gathering that information. We have a legislative data request on that for all the institutions.
Okay.
Mhm.
No further questions. Angela, thank you. See, Wesley, you had to take a lot of the brunt there. Doug, you're up. Pitt State. Yeah, there was some. We got they gave us multiple ones. Everybody gave us one.
Thank you. Good morning. Good to be here again today. We'll take a few minutes and I'll highlight particularly some of the things for Pittsburgh State that might be a little different than what you've heard from Fort Hays and Emporia. Of course, there's going to be a number of common themes as well. Let's start with enrollment trends. And so our overall enrollment has been pretty flat over the last several years on an FTE basis. It's a little more positive on a headcount basis, but there are some stories underlying that I think are important. The biggest and most impactful positive news, I inserted that little extra chart down there in the corner. That's incredibly important. Those are our new freshman numbers. We're up for the 5th consecutive year. And I think maybe even more important than that, or as important as that, is if you notice the magnitude of the increase in this most recent year. We saw a significant increase in this past fall that just added to that kind of 5-year trend of increase that's really having a significant positive impact for us. That leads to overall undergraduate numbers that look very strong. The offsetting pressure point is graduate enrollment. We have struggled with graduate enrollment for the last couple of years. And so we've got some new programs and some new initiatives around identifying and reacting to those pressure points. And we did this spring, just for the first time, start to see some light at the end of the tunnel. Our new graduate enrollment for new students just starting a graduate program is up this spring compared to a year ago. It's the first time we've seen that in a few years. And so an encouraging step. Credit hour really follows the same trends as the FTE enrollment. Really nothing noteworthy I wanted to call attention to there. We move into the financial front and look at the update for the current fiscal year. A couple of things to note. Certainly on the revenue side, we're in a pretty solid place. 49% of budgeted revenues for the full year. The tuition number at 47%, that's a percent or two lower than it is traditionally. We tend to be around 48 or 49, but we've taken a close look at that and still very much believe we're on track to hit budget for the full year. So no concerns there. And then on the expenditure side, we're at 43%. That's also a bit lower than we traditionally see. We tend to be in the 45 to 48% range at the mid-year point. A couple of things happening there. Part of that's just project timing. There are some projects that are happening a bit slower this year than planned. But I think there is an indication there as well that we're likely to underspend our budget by a bit. So we'll probably have some positive results at the end of the year that we can plan for going into next year. On to the 5-year trend, we have seen growth in spending over a number of years. That's really a reflection of several underlying revenue sources that have grown. Our state support has increased a couple of times in the last 5 years. We are seeing growing tuition revenues for the last 3 years. And then we've had some success with federal funding and some grant funding sources that have been growing during this time frame as well. And so all of those have allowed us to invest in certain programs and certain activities that benefit our students and the community. One I would call attention to that was mentioned earlier is our student success programs. In our case, those largely fall into that student services line item, and you will see a noticeable increase there over the last 3 or 4 years. And so that a good portion of that is those investments in those student success programs, along with a handful of other student-related support activities. Let's move on to the comparisons to peer groups. And so two comparisons that I would make. One is to the KBOR selected peer groups. We are lower than all of our KBOR selected peers with one exception. That exception is Valdosta State University. So Valdosta State in Georgia, a handful of years ago, Georgia made a very significant financial investment in their higher education system. When they did that, all of the institutions in Georgia lowered their tuition and fee rates. And so it was at that point they became lower than us. But with that one exception, we're below all of those KBOR selected peers. And then repeating a slide you've seen already, this shows against our athletic conference peers. And we are in the same spot that we've been in for a few years now, but there have been some changes over the last 3 to 4 years that I think are noteworthy. If you take kind of the middle 2/3 of that graph, right, where we're kind of on the lower end of that range, we've moved from kind of the middle of the middle to the lower end of the middle over the last 5 years. And really noteworthy to me is that the gap that you see in those middle groups has really expanded. It was not long ago when you could take the middle 6 or 7 institutions here and they were within $100, $150 of one another. That's expanded. We've seen the Missouri schools growing tuition faster than we have, and so increasing the magnitude of that gap. So I think this has become a more material competitive advantage for us as we, seek new students and as we compete for students. Moving on to CFI, a couple of things that I think are noteworthy here. First of all, the CFI index is that left-hand graph. And so 2, I think, observations I would make. First of all, the kind of longer term trend, right? The 8 to 10-year trend has been steadily improving, steadily increasing. That's really been a function of reducing debt over that time frame and really just being disciplined about our financial planning and financial efforts as we've really aligned expenditures with revenues and been able to grow revenues faster than expenditures. So that's the long-term trend. I think the short-term trend is more cyclical in nature. And so there's a significant jump this current year, 1.7 points. And I would tell you a good portion of that is temporary, right? One of those cyclical things that Jeff was talking about that you wouldn't want to overreact to seeing a single data point is happening for us. We've been accumulating resources over the last year or two to really contribute to some of the big capital projects we've got going on right now. Our prove-out facility, our Gorilla Rising project, even our big maintenance project for our utility tunnels. And so we're at an unusually high level of cash balances that we've in part saved to fund some of those projects. And so I fully expect to see this pull back a little bit over the next 2 years as we finish those 2 projects, but still in a very, very healthy range. Moving on to debt service, our debt service hasn't changed in any significant way. Now, this is showing the debt service amount. So this is the amount we spend each year on principal and interest. And you can see how it's declined materially over the last 8 or so years. A couple of things happening there. We did have 2 fairly significant refinancings that occurred in 2020 and 2022. That saved us a considerable amount of money and helped to reduce this amount. But we also paid off some of the older elements of our debt service during this time frame as they just reached their maturities. We've reached a stable point now. You can see it's very flat in the last couple of years and continues flat really completely into the future until both of those remaining debt items are matured, and that happens in the early to mid 2030s. Expenditures by type, really nothing noteworthy here, pretty similar to I think what you saw from the other 2 institutions. Then on to revenues, I would note a couple of things about the revenue trends. One item that's a little bit unique this year is there at the top of that pie chart. There's a 12% slice of the pie. That's the capital appropriation gift grant category. And so again, those big capital projects that I mentioned a minute ago have generated funding from a really wide range of sources, some of which are in that slice. And so that's not artificially, but unusually high this year as we have a larger number of those projects going on. The other categories have remained relatively stable, and the big ones are what you would expect. State appropriations, the biggest at 35%, tuition at 18%. And then the grant category, the 9% in kind of that bright green color, and then the 7% right beside it. That's one of the areas that we've seen some growth over the last 3 or 4 years. And then finally, just a few observations thinking about moving forward. I would echo Wesley's comment about state funding and just the potential changes that are on the table right now. That's concerning for us. Stable funding and consistent funding really helps us to plan and execute in a more effective way. And so we're concerned about that. Graduate enrollment, and international is a subset of that, but it's really the broader graduate enrollment that we are actively working on changing some of our approaches to make some improvements there. And again, little light at the end of the tunnel we see in our spring numbers, but still a lot more work to be done there. And then competitive salaries becomes kind of an important challenge for us. I think we've made a little progress in the last 3 years, but that's a long-term challenge that we'll have to continue to be after. On the strength side, again, the freshman enrollment's been great. I think our Great Gorilla Scholarship Program has been really effective at helping lead to those trends in freshman enrollment and lead to improvements in student retention. But it's a costly program, and so we're continuing to have to fund more and more bigger portions of our budget from a wide range of sources to fund that program. Again, the student achievement activity is great. And then I think a multifaceted strength is all of the big projects that we have underway that have both university benefits and economic impacts to our city and region and state. And so Gorilla Rising, the Prove Out facility, the KBI project on campus, and then the outdoor track project are all well-received projects that are beneficial to our community, but beneficial to our students as well. And so we're excited for those. That's it, if you have any questions.
Doug, thank you very much. Any questions of Doug? For the three of you today, I went to a presentation a couple weeks ago from the three athletic directors of the Division I schools to the state legislature on the impacts of NIL and all coming forward. Anything that for the three presenting today does that have any impact on you in this regard? Any concerns going forward?
I'll start and let the other two jump in. I mean, we don't have the same exact types of impacts, right? So NIL is something that happens at the Division II level, but it's at a much smaller level. And kind of the direct funding of athletes through university or athletic funds is not something that occurs at the Division II level. And so we don't have that direct financial challenge. I would tell you we have other financial challenges in our athletics funds. Emporia mentioned growing their spending on athletics as a strategic initiative. That's something we've certainly been doing at Pittsburgh State as well, because to remain competitive, you pretty much have to. And so athletics at the Division II level is funded in a little different way, right? We put significant amounts of direct university budget into athletics. They do generate some revenues that go into that equation. And then our donors certainly impact athletics or fund athletics at a high level, and kind of managing that multifaceted funding source to allow us to be competitive and do what we want to do and need to do for our athletes is a challenge, just a little different scale.
Perfect. Ethan, Ashley, David, probably the same question will come next month when you all are presenting. So just might be prepared for that, and just what the impacts will be on the three of you with a little different funding at the Division I level. So if you could address that, we would appreciate that. Any other questions on the financial information? You have anything?
Regent Dykes, I would just, especially for our newer regions, several years ago, the board undertook a review of, in year one, we looked at the student health centers themselves and the services that were provided to students. In year two, it was far more focused on student athletes and how their needs were being addressed by the universities. And the external party that assisted with that second year review was called USCA, the U.S. Council for Athletes Health, I believe. And they did present recommendations for each of the universities. They were very much tailored to each campus. And I know the athletic departments are still focused on implementing those recommendations, and they did report back a few years after the round of reviews. So just so that they know that there has been some discussion about athletics and their relationship with the universities and care of students. So.
Thank you. Next item, the review of the board agenda items under fiscal affairs. We discussed it at our agenda call. We've got the 4 consent agenda items and 1 for discussion. Any questions, comments today on that, Elaine?
We might on the discussion agenda want to talk a little bit about that one. I think Angela, is Angela, or is it David? Maybe it's David, sorry. David will present on that one this afternoon as chair of the Student Insurance Advisory Committee. The Council of Presidents has approved the rates that are in the agenda for the board discussion this afternoon. So David, I don't know what you'd like to review on this.
Good morning, Regents. Yes, I had the pleasure this year of serving as the chair of the Student Insurance Advisory Committee. That responsibility rotates amongst all the CFOs each year. And in the past, I've heard my colleagues speak about what a learning experience of chairing that committee has been. And it certainly has been for me as well. I learned a lot, and I wish I knew as much going into it initially as I did at the end of the process. Within your materials, you have a really great outline of kind of the history and how this has worked, but just to kind of recap that for you real quick. In 2006, the legislature granted authority to the Board of Regents to enter into contracts for voluntary health insurance coverage for students attending the state universities and their dependents. With the current contract with United Health Student Resources, it was bid in 2020, and that current contract is structured for a 10-year term. The Student Insurance Advisory Committee serves again in an advisory capacity with representation from all 6 of the state universities, including Kansas University Medical Center. That committee voted unanimously to recommend to all of you the rate adjustments that are included in your materials today. So that includes a 3.21% increase for Plan 1, followed by a 3.23% increase for Plans 2, 3, and 4. The process of rate negotiation with United Health Student Services did kick off a little bit later than it traditionally does. One of the reasons for that is that they requested a little more time to study the impact of international enrollment and how that was likely to impact the rate calculations. After several discussions with United Health that centered on the premium experience, the moderate program experiencing increases in insurance claim rates, as well as consideration of last year a 6% rate reduction during the previous coverage year, the current market for health coverage, and then in addition, the modest rate increases before you today. The committee recommended adoption of the proposed rates. The committee also recommends inclusion of the Healthiest You telehealth service. That's a 24/7 teledoc service that comes at no additional cost to the students, no additional costs in the insurance rates for either this year or the future years. And as part of the adoption process, the proposed rates, as Elaine outlined, have been presented and adopted by the Council of Business Officers and the Council of Presidents. So I would certainly recommend adoption by Fiscal Affairs and Audit, and then it will go on to the full board this afternoon.
Any questions of David? Regent Crocker?
Thank you, Chair. I'm not sure if this is for David or Elaine, but these rates seem great. Do we have any benchmarking as it relates to what other systems are experiencing to kind of just know how we're tracking? I assume this is below the national average, but do we have any data to back that up?
There were some other comparisons that Becky was able to capture from some other institutions. Oklahoma was one, and we are very comparable and even a little bit lower cost than what those comparisons were.
Thank you.
Before I ask for a motion for this committee to move this forward, I want to give Oswald Zaran an opportunity to make any comments on behalf of the students. I put him on the spot because he wasn't on the student committee, but being in chair of the student organizations, I wanted to give him an opportunity this morning.
Oh, sorry.
Thank you so much, Regents. It's fantastic to speak to you. I think the feedback that I've received from students who were appointed in this committee was it's understandable that the price of healthcare is increasing. So if we wanted to match the standard that we're giving to students and continue to do it, we would have to do some sort of inflationary adjustment. So we understand it. Obviously, in a perfect world, it would be wonderful to not have any increases, but I think the 3.2% is understandable. The other thing that I've also received is the Healthiest You, which is the telehealth system, obviously going through the internal processes of each institution, is something that's a great new addition to the plan. I think it would be helpful for students if they're just wanting to do that especially for online students as well, because I know we have a good number of population of that in Kansas. I think the other really the conclusive idea that I've also received from those students is it would be beneficial to get some sort of whether it be KBOR staff or some other members who understand more about it to perhaps give students a little bit of a walkthrough, because it definitely is learning experience, but I think it's something that we would much appreciate, and my goal would be to start this process early on, so that we can get that initiated. Lastly, I know each of our institutions sometimes have certain committees within ourselves, but I think it would be beneficial if we had student committees within each institution, and perhaps one student who could funnel that information back into SIAC. So that would be my report.
Well, thank you very much. Any further questions, feedback? If not, I'd take a motion to approve the proposed rates for the student health care at the Fiscal Affairs and Audit Committee to move on to the full board this afternoon.
I still move.
Got a motion?
Second?
Second? Yeah, any further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
I
Opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Yeah, move on to United Appropriations Request. Has it changed in the last 5 minutes?
Don't believe so, Mr. Chairman. Thank you. So I've pulled up side by side. This is our attempt to somehow capture legislative adjustments to our system budget, which is in excess of $1 billion. So getting this on one page is a bit of a challenge for us. The House Budget Committee has presented its budget report, I believe, this morning, and as I understand it, appropriations did not make any changes to those recommendations from the committee. So what you'll see here first is the board's request. If the governor made any kind of change in her budget, what the special committee on budget did or did not do, and then what the House committee or what the Senate position is, and then we'll update this as things play out. I believe perhaps Ways and Means might have been taking us up this morning as well. So again, we'll update this as we learn more. But there have been some adjustments. The first one, I put this at the top of the list. That's my personal bias. The public university need-based aid. The House position was to extract 2.3 million from the funding that was in our budget that would be pushed out to the campuses. Looking at what was awarded to students last year on an average basis, that would mean about 1,100 or 1,200 fewer student awards. So $2.3 million is a sizable hit to that funding for us, unfortunately. Everyone seems to be in agreement that the tiered and non-tiered two-year college funding according to the cost model should be funded. There is some discussion about reducing the state's burden for paying for high school students in the Excel and CTE program. The expense for that program has grown sizably. The issue or the challenge with cutting funding 1 year ahead in 2027 means the colleges, that affects enrollments for the current year. We fund the program 1 year in arrears. So students are enrolling this year and we will pay the colleges for those enrollments next year. So there's a little bit of a difficulty there with colleges to catch up with their enrollment policies that haven't been imposed previously now for courses they'll be paid for next year. There's some discussion on the Senate side. They are interested in funding the student success, and the House has not put in funding for the student success for the universities, but has given some funding for the two-year colleges of $5 million. There isn't any funding in for the college, some college, no degree. The blueprint for literacy is garnering interest this year, fortunately. So $5.5 million in the House budget, $5 million in the Senate. There is some interest in funding either one or two of the energy initiatives at the universities. There is an overarching 2.5% reduction for KU, K-State, and Wichita State that totals $9.2 million. The House is interested, and that's on the House side, the House is interested in funding in some Alzheimer's research at KU Med Center. Where we had funding in the board's request for Washburn, the legislature and the governor did not fund any of that. The legislature is funding some initiatives here for the two-year colleges for capital outlay, as they've had in previous years. The partnerships for businesses and apprenticeships at 14.3 million, and the $7 million for the tech college operating grants. And then we've noted the reductions for Emporia, Pittsburgh, and Fort Hays. The House budget reduces the funding for regional stabilization and then takes it out of a separate line item and merges it in with their operating expenditure line item. Both House and Senate are funding $5 million for aviation research. There's some issues with K-State Extension that the House is concerned about, so they are parking some money over with the Finance Council, and then once the Extension Service solidifies their mission or makes some report, then the money would be released. So we try to capture these kinds of notations in this document. But there also is a movement toward funding the debt service for the upcoming new veterinary diagnostic lab, which is really a state facility, but it happens to be because of the expertise at K-State Vet Med. There are some current year, now those items that I all just mentioned, those are all related to 2027. In the current year, the state or the special budget committee went through a process of saying, if you carried over money from 25 to 26, we're lapsing it unless it's for capital improvements. So that affected well over, I think it was $27 million for our office, most of which is either a student financial aid or blueprint for literacy. It does seem that much of that has been restored in the House and the Senate. The House and Senate are also funding a little shortfall we have for Excel and CTE in the current year. But some of the items that were carried over at the campuses of the state universities seems to still be on track to be lapsed. And again, as we get the actual bill language, then we'll get better clarity on the extent of that lapsing. The backside of this document then tries to encompass some of the other information and things that they're doing. The good news on the Campus Restoration Act is that it does seem to be on track to be fully funded, at least as it is now on the day 31 of the 90 days. So there's still opportunity there for change. Both the House and the Senate versions of the appropriation bills have 2028 fiscal year appropriations for our office for financial aid, which is a big advantage for us to understand, knowing that the legislature can come back a year from now and change their mind, but at least we have some idea that they are committing to fund the out year on our student financial aid. So we can alert schools, go ahead and start making some awards for your students. But there are some provisos. The House Higher Ed Budget Committee adopted some provisos. There was some concern that on how we allocate the EBF, how the board allocates the EBF based on square footage. So we're gathering some information for them on how that is being done or has been done. They want to understand the impediments that we have in administering the students' scholarship programs, and we are happy to talk about that with them as well. Some other particular things, I did a technical adjustment to our budget and for Pitt State on the faculty of distinction. That's a very technical adjustment that was made. There's also some language that will require, in a House side, a freezing of student tuition next year over 2026. The House also adopted some language requiring that any faculty member who has tenure, but they're placed on a one-year improvement plan, can't be granted a second year. And if that does happen, to what extent the faculty are put on improvement plans, there has to be a report back to the budget committees. Some other things, there's a notation, there's a lot of interest in legislature about the Dairy Research Center at K-State. That's come up in prior years. It was funded in a prior year, and Governor Kelly vetoed that language. So the dairy industry is still working with the legislature on sorting that out. There's also concern, this is not new, the extent to which K-State Vet Med enrolls out-of-state students. There's a lot of concern about how many students are from out of state and then leave after they graduate. So there's language in there for reporting on that. And then Wichita State back in 2022 received 5 years of digital transformation funding. And so the Senate is interested in that carrying on past that 5-year timeline. Any action on state employee pay has been deferred to another day. That'll probably be one of the last decisions that gets made and gets addressed in the legislative process. So those are just some of the highlights. There are other things going on with the budget, and I'm sure there will be more that we can even offer you this afternoon when we talk about the legislative process here on day 31. Be happy to stand for questions.
Everybody lose their appetite?
Mr. Chair.
Yes. Yes, Regent Wolfmore.
I have some questions, but I can defer to this afternoon when we have a little more time.
Okay.
Thank you.
Any questions from the long, sad faces? Hearing none, we will move on the standing topics. Yeah, the Campus Restoration Act. Chad, do you have anything you want to add there?
Yes. Yes.
Chair Dicus, because the board meeting calendar does not include an April meeting this year, the universities would typically bring their 5-year capital plans to the board for a first read in April. So I guess the consideration is, would that shift to May for the first read and then approval by the board in June? So shifting 1 month to accommodate that change in the calendar.
So we would be seeking your endorsement of suspending board policy to allow that schedule slippage.
I believe that had to have been done when they changed the calendar, so we will, do we need a motion to approve that? We'll approve it.
So moved.
Got a motion?
Second.
Second, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign, motion carries. Any hardship that puts on you all by not having it done as early this year? Perfect. Thank you, Chad. Anything else? Yeah, we review audit findings. There are none. We're still waiting. Yeah, seems like we've been waiting patiently for 3 months on that. So-
Mr. Chairman, we are still gathering the fiscal year 2025 audit reports from all of the 2-year colleges. I believe we have a number of them. We just don't have all of them yet. So when we
Okay.
do, we'll be able to report to you our results.
Yeah. Next month, Becky, can we do a better coordination with the university so we don't, everybody's not printing us a copy of the same documentation? Yeah. So, yeah, conversing with Ashley, Ethan, David, yeah, on who's bringing the paper. So, anything else to come before the committee? If not, I'd take a motion to adjourn. Got a motion? Second, all those in favor, get up and leave. All those who want to vote no can stay here till we come back. We're adjourned.